welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I will show you how to make this fantastic slouchy hat, the Road to Success Chic hat. This is a free pattern available over on redheart.com. I will put a link to it right down there in the video description box below. And while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. This hat is designed by me, Marley Bird, and it uses my brand new yarn line. That's right, I have a brand new yarn called Chic by Marley Bird. This is a merino wool yarn. It comes in 100-gram balls in 24 different colors, and it is machine washable. This is such a fun project using some spectacular yarn. I really feel like once I walk you through each step to make this hat, whether you're a beginner knitter or an experienced knitter, you're gonna get something that you really love. Now, go ahead, grab your pattern and gather your materials, and let's jump in with the start of this hat. The Road to Success Chic hat is one of the first patterns that I have released for the Chic by Marley Bird yarn line. It uses one ball of the Chic by Marley Bird yarn, and I incorporated twisted stitches right down here for the ribbing, and then I incorporated the beautiful cable pattern right here and carried along those twisted stitches up along either side of the cable pattern. Once you get the idea of how to create these twisted stitches, and then you get the cable pattern down like that, you will have no problem when it's time to transition up here to the top of the hat and do the shaping for the crown. And when we get to this portion, we will use double pointed needles. Now, they might look really scary, but you have to trust me on this. They are not very difficult once you follow along with my instructions. And I'm also going to show you how to include a lifeline just in case you're not too sure about those double pointed needles. That way you have a place to rip back to and start again. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. First thing you're going to do is grab the smaller of the two needle sizes that I suggested for this hat. Now, you will be using 16-inch circular needles for this project, and that's because the circumference of the hat is smaller than the 16 inches of this needle, making it the perfect size to be able to get all of these stitches around this needle without them stretching and pulling. You could start this hat on double pointed needles, but as I said, I know many of you are already afraid of those, so let's start off with our circulars. I am going to move the sample hat aside. I actually just want to put it on. I think it's so cute. For today's demonstration, I am using the colorway Mimosa because I think it's so pretty and bright and cheerful for those dreary little winter days when you might wear this hat. We will begin with a long tail cast on, and when we do a long tail cast on, we want to make sure we have enough tail to get us through all of our cast on. So the best rule of thumb when you're doing a long tail cast on is to make your tail 3 times the total length of whatever your project is. Well, the circumference of around our head is probably about 20 inches, 22 inches. So we want this to be 3 times 22. So that would be 66. So let's just kind of guesstimate out roughly 66 inches. I'm going to guess it's about there. And I'm going to give myself just a little extra slack just in case. It's at this point that I will place my slip knot. If you've never done a slip knot before, don't worry, I'm here to help you out. You're going to take the tail and you're going to place that into the palm of your hand. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and your middle finger. When you come back up, cross that over. Once you've crossed that over, go ahead and turn your fingers. And then when you come underneath this first loop, grab the back loop and take them off of your fingers. When you give that a nice little pull, you'll see you have a slip knot there that is adjustable simply by pulling apart the 2 strands of yarn. Really super easy, and if you want to see that again, go ahead and hit pause or rewind, or there's also a full video just how to do slip knot and the long tail cast on. For the long tail cast on, hold the needle in your hand. Make sure you have a finger on that slip knot that's on your needle, so that way it doesn't fall off. Take your other hand, and we are going, I call this the quacker, quack, quack, quack. And I'm going to take my quacker and I'm going to put it between my 2 legs of yarn, okay? So right now with my quacker, I have my tail over my thumb and I have my working yarn over my finger. When I get to this position, you can see if I were to let go, my needle is just resting right there, okay? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a gun. Bang, bang. You see that? Make a gun. And when I do this, you can see these 3 fingers down here, they aren't really doing anything. So what I'm going to do is I want to take the working yarn and come around and have my fingers hold that. I'm going to take my tail and have my fingers hold that. Now, when I re-grip my needle and I'm holding my stitch here, I'm still in my bang bang position, but as I pull my yarn down with the needle, I'm sort of in a slingshot, and this is the position we want to be in. You want to make sure that the yarn is coming up and around your thumb, up and around your forefinger. Okay, this is going to be our reset position every time we finish a stitch. So let's go ahead. Here we go. We're going to set. This is our set. Take our needle, start down here at the palm of your hand, go up your thumb, swivel around to the tip of the finger, come down the finger. See how it grabs that yarn? Now that I've grabbed that yarn, you can see I have a little window right there. See where my thumb is? I'm going to swing that needle right through that window. What that has done is it has placed that stitch right there on my needle. And when I drop the yarn off of my thumb and I give a little tug on my tail, it tightens up that stitch onto my needle just like a slip knot, right? And I readjust. Ooh, crud. Look at that. See, I wasn't hanging on. I was too busy talking. That is a prime example. I'm not even going to edit that out. I'm going to let you guys see that. All right, so I'm right here, up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off my thumb, give it a pull, hang on to those stitches, get back in my reset. I'm back in my reset mode, and I start again. Up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb, get back in my reset. So I have 3 stitches right there. The pattern calls for 90 stitches. So we want to get 90 stitches cast on this way. Let's go ahead and get through those 90 stitches. All right, I have my 90 stitches cast on. You can see that as I was casting on, the stitches just gradually work their way around the needle, which is fantastic. That's what we want. I have a nice tail left over. It's not too super long, but I have a little bit there. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to put my tail into a nice little butterfly just so that it's out of the way. And if you want instructions on how to do a yarn butterfly, I have a full video right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel you can check out. But I find that just putting this yarn in a yarn butterfly allows me to have it there in case I need it later, but it's tucked up and out of the way. All right, so I have my stitches cast on, and I am right-handed, and I can knit both with the yarn in my right hand and my left hand. It doesn't matter to me. But I'm going to start off here, and I'm going to set my needle down. And when you are casting on stitches to work in the round, when you're working with circulars, I love to use the long tail cast on because we get this really beautiful, nice ridge right there, okay? And it makes it easy to see if you have your stitches twisted at any point when you're casting on with your needle. So once you get all your stitches cast on, I want you to maneuver them around the needle just like this with that really pretty edge facing the inside of the needle. What you're looking for here is making sure that this edge is evenly spaced all the way around the needle and not twisted at any one point or another. So I'm going to twist this so you can see what we don't want. We don't want this. We don't want this nice edge to come along here and it goes around the needle and comes back around. That is no good. That is a completely different pattern called a Mobius, and we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that our stitches are nice and straight, okay? So it's very important we do that. All right, you see how that is? All right, so once our stitches are cast on, we're ready to get started. Now, there are a couple things you can do here. We want to make sure that when we join to work in the round, we know what the start of our round is. You can either just pay attention to where your tail is, and every time you come back to where that tail is, you'll know that's the start of your round. or you can use a really nifty stitch marker. Now, this is one of the stitch markers that I have made. And again, I have a video here on the YouTube channel you can check out. I'll put a link to it right up there in that little I button. But you can use any stitch marker you want to use. But I will caution you, you want to make sure you're using a marker that's not going to stretch out your stitches at the start of your row. Meaning you don't want to use a marker that is too big. This one, because I used this jewelry wire, okay, so it's a coated flexible wire, it's not going to stretch out my stitches. Even though it's big lengthwise, the widthwise, it's going to just allow those stitches to collapse that stitch marker, and it's going to be really convenient. So I'm going to use this one. So what I will do, I'm going to pick up my stitches, and I'm going to pick them up like this, where the stitches that are on the cord are essentially facing away from me, okay? I don't want them on this side towards me, because then I'll be knitting inside out, and I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure that my stitches are out there, okay? As I am looking at my work, I can see here, okay, this first stitch on my left hand needle, that is my actual slip knot. That's where we began. And this stitch over here on my right hand needle, that's the last stitch we created. So what we want to do here is we're going to start knitting in the round simply by knitting the stitch over here on my left hand needle with the yarn that's attached to the stitch over here on my right hand needle. And this is where I will place my marker. So I'm going to stick my marker right there, and it's just going to rest on my needle. It's not going to interfere with anything else. I'm just going to have it hang out there. And I am simply going to start in my pattern. Now my pattern is a knit one through the back loop, purl one. And the reason I did that is because I want to get a twisted rib. So let me show you how to do that. Are you ready? When we typically knit, we will go into this stitch just like so, correct? We go into the stitch from the front loop and go back and then knit. When we want to twist the stitch, I'm actually going to knit the stitch through that back loop. You see that? It's simply, I'm just going to put my needle in that back loop, and let's go ahead. I'll start off with English. I will yarn over my needle and then pop that out just like I normally would and have that stitch come off. Now I want to purl the next stitch, so I bring my yarn between my needles, go into the next stitch as if to purl, just like normal, purl that stitch, out and off. I want to knit the next stitch through the back loop, so I bring my yarn to the back, between my needles, go into the back leg of that next stitch, yarn over, bring it through that stitch, and off. Between my needles, purl the next stitch. Having trouble. And off. Between my needles, knit the next stitch through the back leg, yarn over, pop it out, and off. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my yarn in my other hand. It's the same motion, same process. I am just using my other hand to hold the yarn. As you're working along here, you can also move the stitches around the cord so that way they're up here ready for you to use, okay? So my next stitch is a purl, so I'm going to bring my yarn between the needles, go into the stitch, yarn over, out, and off. Between my needles, go into the back leg of the stitch, yarn over, out, and off. Between my needles, purl, between my needles, back loop, around, out, and off. Can you see that? It doesn't look like much right now, but it will look like more as we go around. And I also want to point out, if you're getting a little bit of a gap right here, that's totally okay, because we can use our tail and seam up anything there that happens to get a little bit stretched out. So I'm not too worried about that, as long as you move along, that gap does close and it doesn't look visible. So here at the start, I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to continue on and get to the end of this round following these same instructions, so that way you can see how you work the next round as well, okay? All right, so I just purled my last stitch, and if you've done everything correctly, you will end with the purl, because your first stitch after the stitch marker here is that twisted knit, correct? So what I'm going to do is I've reached my stitch marker. I simply just slip my marker and put it over here on my right hand needle again, and I ignore it. It just lets me know I'm at the end of my round. When I'm going to work back onto these stitches, it's going to be a little bit easier this time around because I actually know what each stitch is, because I can tell if it's a purl because of the purl bump or a knit because of the knit stitch. So that will help me keep a little bit more on track if you're having a little bit of trouble remembering if you've just did a knit or just did a purl. We are still going to maintain our knitting through the back leg or back loop, however you want to say it. And so what I will do is on this first stitch, I'm still going to go ahead and knit through the back leg. All right. Then I will continue on, purl the next stitch, and then knit through the back leg, just like before. Purl the next stitch, knit through the back leg. And as you carry on, you'll find that you get a nice rhythm, and you're also going to notice that all of your knit stitches are twisted, and that's what we want. And what I mean by twisted is that the last bottom portion of the knit, it looks like those two legs are crossing over. It's almost like they've crossed their legs, okay? As you carry on doing this, these knit stitches, because they're twisted, it's going to give you a very beautiful line going right up your ribbing. Let me show you another piece that I've been working on, and I can show you the difference between one that is twisted and one that is not. As we take a look right here, this is a finished sample. I'm going to show you guys later, but you'll see the beautiful twisted rib down here, and see how nice and tight those rib stitches are. And this is still just a knit one, purl one, but we've knit the leg or the knit stitches through the back leg. This one right here is a knit one, purl one, but it's just a regular old knit. See how much looser those stitches are, and the stitches are not crossed over themselves. So as we take a look between the two, you can see these are nice and tight and twisted, and these are not. I really like the way those twisted knits look, and I thought that they just really made this pattern that little bit different from the knit one, purl one. Now, is that to say you can't use a knit one, purl one? You could change up the pattern and use knit one, purl one? Sure, you could. You could absolutely do that if that's what you want to do. But I will encourage you to go ahead and give this a try. Do the knit one, purl one ribbing, and let's move on to the next part of the hat. Go ahead, finish your ribbing, and we'll move on to the next portion of the hat. Did you finish your ribbing? It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? If you take a look down here, you can see that I just finished mine, and I have this really nice line of twisted knit stitches that just look really beautiful. And again, if I compare them to the regular knit one, purl one ribbing, you can see where they're just a little bit tighter. The next part of the instructions say that we need to transfer our stitches now to a larger needle. So we aren't going to do that by slipping stitches. We're simply going to work our new stitches onto our new needle. It's really quite easy, and we're going to do it at the same time that we set up our stitch pattern for the cables. I will go ahead and grab the size 8 or 5 millimeter needle that we're going to use now. I'm going to remove my marker for this point because otherwise it's going to fall off. And this is my right needle that I've been using. I'm going to simply just kind of give it a pull so that my stitches are just resting on that cable. And instead of holding the right needle I have been using, I'm going to hold my new needle. So I'll just hold that one out of the way. And I'm going to begin in pattern right here over these stitches. So if you follow along in pattern, you'll see that this first stitch here is always going to be a twisted knit, and we will keep that a twisted knit all the way through all the cable stitches. So I will go ahead and knit this first stitch through the back leg onto my new needle. The next two stitches, I want those to be purls. So I'm going to purl the first one, and I'll purl the next one. So I have 2 purls. Now I want to do 16 knits. So I will knit just like normal across 16 stitches. I'm going to have to count here. So those are my 2 purls. I can tell because of my purl bump. And I have 4 knits. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Now, the instructions are going to have us do a purl 2 together. And what this will do is it is going to decrease 1 stitch. And the reason I want that 1 stitch decreased is because when I do the next purl stitch, I am now in line with these twisted knits, and I can go ahead and continue on keeping that entire column as twisted knits. Just like the first stitch before our cable pattern and this last stitch, I want to keep them both as twisted knits all through the cable pattern. Now I can continue on and just knit around until I get to the end. I want to point out here that I started off with a purl 2 together and then I purled 1. We could just as easily have done a purl 1 and then a purl 2 together with the next 2 stitches. It really doesn't matter as long as we end up with 2 purls and we've eliminated that 1 knit stitch from the ribbing that we were working with down there, okay? So let me go ahead and just knit all the way back around. And when I get to the end, that's when I will add my stitch marker back to my needles. You can see here as I get to the end of this round, my stitches are no longer resting on my previous needle, they're on my new needle. And it'll be easy to see because I have 2 different types of needles that I've used. I've done that because I wanted you to be able to distinguish one needle from the next. But if you have a choice, go ahead and use the same type needle as you were using for this needle. So for me, if this were my real hat pattern, I'd want to use both needles that looked like this, just in the different sizes. So now the needle that I started off with is free. It's no longer there. I can adjust and put my stitches all on these 2 needles, just like we had before. And I can take my marker, put it back on there, and I'm back to working in the round. Now, I've done this pattern so that these first stitches right here are where we do our cable pattern. And it just, for me, it makes it so much easier to know I'm doing those cable stitches right there at the start of my round versus somewhere in the middle of the round, because I tend to forget, things get in the way. But if I keep them right there at the start of the round, I know every time I'm at the end of my round, it's time for another cable pattern. Now, cables are not difficult. You've got to trust me on this. They are so easy. All you're doing is changing the position of 2 or 4 or 6 or more stitches so that you are knitting them out of order. We've already set up the first row if you're looking at the cable chart on the pattern. We have our twisted knit stitch here, 2 purls, 16 knits, a twisted, 16 knits, 2 purls, and a twisted stitch over here. So between all of these stitches here, that's where we will do our cable pattern. Now, if we take a look at the little sample here, let's look at the yellow sample. You can see that this cable pattern, it starts out here. I didn't start the first cable in the center. I didn't want it to be right there in the center because I felt like it pulled up on those rib stitches. I made it so that we started the cable out here. There are a set of 3 cables that you work to create this lovely stitch as it goes out. There's a cable here, a cable here, and a cable here. Cable here, cable here, cable here. So it takes 3 sets to go out before you adjust and come back to center and come out again. If you are looking at the chart, this will make a lot of sense. In this first one here, we're starting with the center one. So we will work over our twisted stitch, our 2 purls, we will knit 2 stitches, and then we will work a cable. Then we'll knit 4 stitches, and then we'll make a cable. And then we'll have 2 stitches, 2 knits, 2 purls, and our twisted stitch right here. I wanted to point this out because I know that some of you out there who are very type A will say, Marley, why didn't I start in the center? And I wanted you to know there's a method to my madness with this. I didn't want to start in the very center of the cable because I just didn't think it looked right. I thought it really pulled up on the ribbing portion right here. So that's why I had you start out here for the very first cable. Let me go ahead and get you started with this first cable, and then we'll take a look at another swatch that I have worked up a few cables in, and we'll check out some more cables. That way you can see just how easy they are. As I mentioned here at the start, we will always keep this first stitch as a twisted knit. So I will go ahead and knit it through the back leg, just like I've been doing all along. Now I'm going to maintain these 2 purls throughout the entire cable portion of the hat. Now that I've done those 2 purls, I am to my 16 knits right here, ready to work my first cable. The first cable starts off with a knit 2, and then these next 4 stitches are the ones we want to cable. We want these 2 stitches right here to come in front of these 2 stitches. In order to do that, you will grab a cable needle, and you can also use double pointed needles. And so I'm going to do that today. I'm actually going to use one of the double pointed needles that you are going to use for the top of the hat, because maybe some of you don't have a cable needle, and I want you to be able to see how you could actually use a double pointed needle for this portion of the hat. I'll take my double pointed needle and I'll go into these first 2 stitches as if to purl. That's very important. You're going to slip them off as if to purl. See that? They're on my cable needle or my DPN. I'm going to hold those stitches to the back of the work. I'm just going to kind of tuck them back there out of the way. Now what I want to do is bringing my yarn in front of those stitches, okay? So they're in front of those stitches. I will knit the next 2 stitches. So I will knit 1 and I will knit 2. Now I have a choice. I can either knit these 2 stitches from the DPN itself, or I can slip those 2 stitches back onto my left hand needle and knit it from there. And so that's what I'm going to choose to do. I just slipped them back onto my left hand needle, and I will knit those 2 stitches from my left hand needle. You can see now these stitches here are in front of the stitches that we moved to the cable needle, and they are now cabled. I will move on and I will knit 4 stitches. And it's time to cable again. So we have these 4 stitches. This time, these 2 stitches need to go in front of those 2 stitches. So I will take my cable needle or my DPN, slip those 2 stitches onto my DPN. Remember, I'm going in as if to purl. And I'm slipping them on and I'm just holding them right here to the front this time, okay? Now I will go ahead, I will knit the next 2 stitches. I have a little bit of fuzz right there. Knit the next 2 stitches. Now I have these ones that are hanging out and I want to knit those. So I can knit them directly from my DPN or directly from my left-hand needle. This time, let's knit them from the DPN so you can see what that looks like. I just hold the DPN up here, and I treat it as if it's the same needle in my left hand. I just knit from it. Move the DPN out of the way. Carry on in my pattern. So I knit 2, purl 2, and then knit 1 through the back leg. That is the first full row of the cable pattern. Then I would carry on just knitting all the way around until I come back to my marker. You only cable every other round. So when I get back to the marker on this round, on the following round, I will knit my knits and purl my purls. So when I get back to the following round and I'm back over here, I will knit that one through the back leg, purl those 2, knit all of these, purl those 2, and knit that one through the back leg. You're only cabling every other round, and you will also notice that the cables will move over by 2 stitches every other round. That goes back to me when I reminded you, or not reminded you, when I told you that you are working these cables in sets of 3. So it's a cable here, a cable here, a cable here. And then we adjust, we go back to the center, cable, cable, cable. And that's what creates the really beautiful look. Let's go ahead and take a look at another sample swatch that I already have some cables worked up on so that you can see what the stitches look like as you're working them. I'm right here and I'm going to get over to where my cables are going to start. So I'm just knitting away, and these ones are not twisted. I'm knitting as I normally knit, so just a regular old knit. I'm to my marker, so I slip my marker. Grab some yarn here a little bit. So let me show you how this works. The first stitch is always twisted, so I knit it through the back leg. Then we will purl 2 stitches. I will knit 2. Now I want these 2 stitches to go in front of those 2. So I will take my cable needle or my DPN. I'm going to slide those to that needle and hold them to the back. Then I will knit the next 2 stitches. And then I can either knit from the DPN or put those back on my left-hand needle. I'm going to put them back on my left-hand needle. Bring my yarn back to the back and knit those 2 stitches. So I have cabled. Now I knit 4. And it's time to cable again. I can take these first 2 stitches, put them to my cable needle or my DPN, hold them to the front, knit the next 2 stitches. I will place these 2 stitches back on my left-hand needle. That's how I like to do it, so I try and keep it consistent. And then I knit those 2 stitches. So I've just changed their placement. I carry on by knitting 2, purl 1, purl the next one, and then knit through the back leg. So I've carried on my cable, and you can see as you move on, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, they start to spread out just like so, and you'll do this until your hat measures about 9 inches, and you'll end on a row 3. On the original hat that I made, you can see here that that means it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense for you. Now that I have finished this cable, I would go ahead and I would work 1 full round. So I will knit to my marker again, and then I will work my stitches. I'll knit my knits, purl my purls, and then I'll do the following cable round. When you get to the end of your cables, you'll begin to do decreases, and we will decrease our stitches so that they are partnered up one to the other. So we will have one that's an SSK and one that's a knit 2 together, and it makes a really nice closing finish to the hat. Let me pull in this one that doesn't have the pom-pom on it so you can see how nice it looks. If you take a look here, you can see where I have my SSK knit 2 together, SSK knit 2 together, SSK knit 2 together. And I did that all around the top of the hat because I thought it really made a nice finishing. You'll also notice that the decreases start just after that last row of cables right there. So we will start our decreases right there. Now decreases are really simple. I'll show you how to do the first round of SSKs and knit 2 togethers. And then you'll just follow the instructions, making sure that you do a decrease round every other round. When the stitches get too tight around your needle, that's when you'll transfer to a set of double pointed needles. And I'll show you how to do that as well. But before I do that, I also want to show you how to add a lifeline. So let me go ahead, get this hat up to where it has its 10 cables, and I can get you started. To shape the crown of a hat, it's really as easy as working decreases every other row until you get down to just a few stitches to pull together at the top of the hat. What I want to show you right now is how to add a lifeline to your project. So that way, as you're working along and you transfer over to double pointed needles, maybe they don't work out for you very well the first try. I want you to have a point of reference that you can rip back to easily. And in order to do that, we're going to do a lifeline. So let's go ahead and do that first. I'm using Aunt Lydia's crochet thread, and I chose crochet thread because it is a mercerized cotton and it's not going to stick to my wool. And so I found that it's easy to use. I'm getting a length of yarn that is longer than the circumference of my hat, and I want it doubled, okay? So the reason I want it doubled is when I grab my tapestry needle and thread the yarn through that tapestry needle, I want to be able to pull that yarn through and have the length that I'm going to be pulling through the hat doubled up. So if you look here, I have my yarn through the needle and it's just doubled up all the way down here to the end where we have the two end pieces. I'm going to place a knot just right there, just so that it kind of stays in place. Okay, so those two pieces don't come undone. Once you get the thread strung through your needle, it's time to then work this tapestry needle through the stitches as they're resting on your knitting needle. All I'm going to do is take my tapestry needle and I'm going to work it through all of the stitches as they're resting on my left hand needle. I do want to make sure that I'm through the entire stitch and I'm not splitting the yarn at all. And then I pull my thread through. And I would do this all the way around my stitches until I had all of my stitches resting on my thread here, okay? So this thread is going to hold those stitches in the event that I have to rip back. This thread will hold those stitches so they won't go anywhere. Now, as you start going along, and maybe you get this far and it's kind of hard to get into these stitches a little, one thing you can do is move the needle so that way the stitches are resting on the cable needle and it makes it so much easier to get through them. Look at that. You can just thread it through. Make sure you're never pulling it completely so that it comes out those first ones. And you also want to make sure that you're only going through the stitch. You're not splitting the yarn at all. And you'll go through all of these stitches. Once you get through all the stitches, you will then go ahead and carry on in your pattern, and you will make sure that you do not knit that actual thread. You're just going to knit the stitches and you're going to ignore that thread. That thread is only there in the event that you have to rip out, and it will hold the stitches for you. Okay, so you would do this all the way around. It's really easy, and this is just one of those things. It's like a safety net, and it can be used on any pattern. Say you are making a sweater and you reach a point in the sweater where the pattern stitches are going to change or you have to do some shaping, but you know that all of your stitches prior to that point are perfect. And you want to make sure that if you have to rip out, that you have a point that it's, okay, at this point, it's exactly perfect. That's where a lifeline can really come in handy. It is especially helpful if you're doing lace or cables. And you do it just like this. You simply just bring it all the way through. Now you'll notice my stitch marker fell off, which I am going to add back on, but I am going to also mention, because I have done it one too many times, you do not want to put your thread through the stitch marker. Remember, because we want our stitch marker to continue moving up with our work, we don't want it to stick down here with this thread. So I made this thread nice and long, remember? So I can go ahead and I can snip it off my needle. And if I wanted to, I can grab both of those ends. So it was the end I started with and the final end, and just knot them together. So that way they don't come undone. And so that way I don't accidentally grab this and snag it and pull it. But now all of those stitches are secure on this nice thread, and now I just ignore it. Once you've added the lifeline, you can carry on in pattern. And if you remember, I mentioned to you that these first knit stitches when we're working our cable are going to be twisted, and the last stitches of the cable are twisted. But when we move on to the crown of the hat, we aren't going to twist those stitches anymore. We're going to treat all of these stitches at the crown of the hat as just knits. So we're no longer going to maintain these purl twos or the twisted stitches. We're simply going to knit. So this first round, you would simply go in and follow the pattern as it's written. And you'll notice that this is where we start our decreases. You'll notice that in the pattern it says when all of these stitches are too uncomfortable to keep on your circular needles, you want to transfer them over to double pointed needles. I found that when I got to where I was on round 5 is when I wanted to transfer over to double points, but because I don't want you to wait until I get to round 5, I'm going to transfer to double points right now. So when I transfer to double points, I'm not going to need my stitch marker anymore. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker because it would simply fall off. I can now use the tails of my lifeline as my place marker if that's the end of my round, if that's what I need. I will now go ahead and I will grab one double pointed needle. I will ignore the right needle that I was supposed to be using before, very similar to when we transferred over to this set of circulars. And I'm going to continue on in pattern, knitting all my stitches onto this double pointed needle. So you'll notice in the pattern, it says to knit 7. So we will knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we will do an SSK. An SSK is a decrease that leans to the left. So we'll take our needle, slip the first stitch as if to knit, slip the next stitch as if to knit, take our left hand needle, put it into the front leg of those 2 stitches, and then we will yarn over our right hand needle just like we normally do to finish a knit stitch. So it's just as if we knit those 2 stitches through the back leg, but we wanted to change their orientation first. Once you've done the SSK, you will now do a knit 2 together. So we have these 2 stitches and we simply want to knit these 2 stitches together. This set of decreases is the first set of decrease for this really cool 5-point top. Now you'll notice that the pattern says to go ahead and knit 14, and then we will do that decrease again. So let's go ahead and do that. So there's my decrease. So I've knit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now, I have a lot of stitches on this needle at this point. I could have stopped back here, but I'm going to go ahead and keep those on here, and I'm going to do my first decrease, the SSK, and then I'm going to switch needles. So let's go ahead and do the first decrease here. So I slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, take my left hand needle, put it in the front leg of those 2 stitches, and then knit those 2 stitches together. I now will let that needle just hang out there. I've knit these stitches tight enough that they are not going to fall off, okay? I promise they're going to be just fine. The trick here is that as we transfer from this DPN to this DPN with these stitches, we must keep the first 2 stitches nice and tight, okay? We want to make sure that the stitch over here, this last stitch on this DPN, is nice and snug to the first 2 stitches on this one. So this first set of stitches I have to do here is the other part of my decrease, right? I need to do a knit 2 together. So I will begin with my knit 2 together, and I am pulling my working yarn and wiggling my DPN so that that stitch is nice and snug up to that one. Can you see that? Once I've done that, I will then knit the next stitch and keep that nice and tight, and then carry on. And this one says that we have to do the knit 14 because we're doing that knit 14 SSK knit 2 together a total of 3 times, and we've done it once, so we have to do it 2 more times. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to do an SSK, slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, left hand needle into the front leg, and then knit those 2 together. So there is that set, okay? I need to do a knit 2 together over here, and I'm going to go ahead and switch needles now because I don't want to put a knit 2 together on this needle yet. Like, I don't want to split up. I don't want to have an SSK and a knit 2 together on the same needle and then change a needle, because the next time I have to do a knit 2 together, I'll have 1 stitch on the needle I just finished and 1 stitch on the next needle, and I don't want to do that. So that's why I'm splitting the needle points at the section between the SSK and the knit 2 together. Just like before, I will knit 2 together on this first one, and I will pull the yarn and tug my needle so that way that stitch is nice and tight to that one. But for it to stay in place, I also have to knit the next stitch, keep that nice and tight, and then carry on. So I'll get my 14 here, There's 14. I will slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, put my left needle on the front leg of those 2 stitches and then knit them together. Now I have one more needle that I can use, and I can either put that one needle with all of these stitches, or I can carry on and try and get to the midpoint over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use that next needle for all of these stitches. So just like before, I'm going to let that one hang out, grab my next needle because I'm using a total of 4 needles in play, and my 5th needle will be the one I knit on. So I will knit these 2 stitches together, wiggle and tug, make sure that's nice and close, and then we will knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, once you have those first couple stitches nice and snug, we'll carry on in the pattern. And you'll notice in the pattern, this time we have to knit 15 and then knit 2 together. What is happening there is, remember when we did that decrease after we finished the ribbing, so that way our twisted stitches were stacked from the ribbing twisted stitches all the way up? So we have 89 stitches. In order for us to get all of our stitches to land precisely for the next several rounds, this last set of decreases, we will knit 15 and then do our knit 2 together and then knit 7. At that point in time, we'll have enough stitches equally spaced between all the decreases to carry on with the pattern as normal and be able to do our decreases equally for all of the different points of decreases. Now, that's a whole lot of words there just to say, follow the pattern. Trust me, knit 15, even though we've been doing the knit 14, it works out. Once you finish the stitches, you'll notice that your cable needle is now free, so I'm going to set that aside. And all of your stitches are spaced around your double pointed needles, and they are not going to fall off. You keep these nice and snug, keep the stitches between each of those join points nice and snug, and you won't have any problem. Once you finish this round, you'll then go to a plain knit round and then a shaping round after that. You'll alternate those 2 rounds until you get down to 10 stitches. Once you get to 10 stitches, you will simply cut your yarn, thread it through all the stitches that are on your needle, very similar to how you did the Lifeline, and then take your needles out, give it a nice pull, and weave in your ends. It's really super easy. Let's take a look at the finished product. Let's move this out of the way and bring this one in. You can see here that this is the beautiful mimosa color, and we've already looked at this once before, right? We have this nice ribbed, twisted rib right here. We have our beautiful cable pattern coming up, and when we get to the top, let me open this up a little bit for us. We can see where the cable pattern stopped, and we began doing our shaping points. When you get to the 10 stitches and you thread them through, just like I mentioned, you'll get this really beautiful top of the hat. You will weave in your ends on the inside, so that way everything is disappeared and tucked away nicely, and you have a super cute hat. Now you have a choice. You could leave the hat just like this if you wanted, or you could have stopped the hat. Let's get that little fuzz out of there. You could have stopped the hat after maybe 5.5 inches or 6 inches and done some shaping to get a beanie, or you could add a pom-pom. All you do is grab your favorite pom-pom maker, make one up. I made one that's about 2 inches in diameter. I think it's really super cute. And you would just thread that right into the top so that you get a nice pom-pom at the top of the hat. Very similar to what I did on this really cute green one. And I'm telling you, you guys, this hat is a must-have. Look how cute it is. Oh, I just think this is just one of the cutest little hats. I can't wait to wear mine this winter and fall, and hopefully you'll love yours too. Again, it only takes 1 ball of Chic Sheep by Marly Bird to complete this really great hat. Hopefully with all the tips and tricks and help that I just gave you in this video, you'll be able to make one for yourself. It's called the Road to Success. Let me try that one more time. It's called the Road to Success Chic Hat. It made me think, like this cable portion made me think of a windy, crazy road that you'd take in order to get to that next level in your life. And for me, the road to success of having my own yarn line has been quite the adventure. And so this is a representation of that. Hopefully you enjoy it. It's a free pattern over on redheart.com. If you do make this hat, please share with me. I have a Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/MarleyBird. I would love to see your finished hat. And other than that, make sure you hit subscribe so you're up to date whenever I release new videos or talk about new products. I'd love to have you join me here. And don't forget to smash that like button, as my kids say. And good luck with your own hat, guys. Bye! Oh, that's so cute. Hey, don't leave yet. I'm sure there are other videos here that you will enjoy. Go ahead and check out some of my knitting and crochet videos, as well as some of my crafting videos. You will love them, I promise. If you hit subscribe, you'll be up to date whenever there's a new video released. And as my kids say, don't forget to smash that like button. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.